Hello.
I need to take myself off mute, and I even know how to use Zoom. How are you, Jody? I haven't seen your beautiful face in too long.
Doing well. What's going on?
Nothing much. You'll get to hear Maddie whine in the background, so it'll be just like you're home.
I'm home. Hi.
Hi, Tammy. You're on mute. I can't hear you.
I couldn't pass this up. I took time out of cleaning to join you. Rachel and I are joining you.
That's so nice. I love your background and all the colors of the books. That's not actually your library. That's a background, yeah?
Yeah, I've learned how to master the virtual backgrounds.
Yeah.
What you get
I
for
haven't.
teaching on Zoom.
So I've been teaching on Zoom for a long time. I don't know how to do match virtual backgrounds. But are you on an iPad? Hi, Rachel.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
No, an iPad, you can't do it. An iPad, I can't do it. I can do it on my phone and I can do it on my computer.
Oh, okay. I'm just going to have to look into it. I like the color coding. I want to look at the titles in the background.
I know, but it's fun because like when I teach Merchant of Venice, we go to Venice. And when I teach Midsummer Night's Dream, we're in the forest.
Yeah.
We did Emily Dickinson poetry. We were in Amherst. It's all good.
Only if you sing them all to the Yellow Rose of Texas.
There you go.
Hi, Robin Rachel.
Rifki. Hi, Maya.
Oh, Robin Rifki.
It's all good.
Pesach cleaning chemicals.
Totally. It's nice to see your kitchen, Maya.
Yes.
And Rebecca's bedroom, which I've, gotten. Who's JD? Okay. I'll give people another few minutes to sign on. In between cleaning the freezer and the stove. So Rebecca, I have Moroccan minhagim in my share tonight. Just one slide, but
nice.
if I don't give you the shout out, I'll give you the shout out now. It's a little disconcerting, all the names without the screens on.
Oh, there she is.
Oh, wow. Hey, David.
Hey.
Hey.
Hi, Rachel. Good.
Good to see you.
Nice to see you too.
Hi, that's Ricky.
Do you remember? I taught you in camp. It's going to be exactly the same.
Did you teach Ricky or did you teach? You definitely taught Neely. Did you do Ricky too?
I did Ricky too.
Oh, wow. Do you remember more?
Not every day, but over the course of the 7 weeks, I absolutely hung out with the big kids too.
Neely? Trying to come say hi to Mora Rifki? Do you remember Mora Rifki from camp? Come say hi.
I've really expanded my age range, Tammy.
Yes. 3-year-olds? Yes.
Year-olds to adults. I just don't teach reading.
Oh, all right. Well, that's okay.
Okay. Give everybody another minute.
Okay.
How's everybody doing? Yeah? Okay, I feel like I've got the last lot of the alumni cheer, so I need to do a grand slam or something like that. So hopefully it'll bring you guys into, you know, something good. Okay, there's still a couple people signing on. So I sent out sources to this year's students on WhatsApp this morning, but I have a PowerPoint. So if you have the sources next to you, like that's great for knowing where I'm going to be going, but I'll be putting everything in front as well. So, should we get going? I'm going to share my screen and oh, of course it's not responding. 1 second. I'll stop the share. Okay. I will reopen it and hopefully it won't crash. Okay, so as we go into Pesach this week and we're all living in a slightly different reality than we're used to, I thought it would be interesting to consider the roots of Pesach and its messages for us. Is my microphone working now?
Yeah.
You guys can hear me. Okay. It's a good thing the computer communicates with me. Okay. Okay, so I wanted to look at the Yisod of Pesach from Tanakh throughout Tanakh as a message for us today. And this word Jewish peoplehood. So for the past last year, I was working with Jewish communities in Europe. And one of the things that kept coming up all year long was that we were not allowed to use the big I word. And the word that was taboo was identity, because identity is one of these terms that people band around, but it is actually meaningless. I kind of liken it to calling somebody nice, right? Like you call somebody nice and you don't really mean anything specific. You have to come up with something a little bit more concrete. So talking about Jewish identity is something like that. And in that discussion of identity, I always thought to myself, I never said this aloud, is like it's kind of like this newer term that people use called peoplehood. But the truth is that we have a definition of peoplehood. Peoplehood is this term that has been coined in the last, let's say, decade. It might be the last 15 years. And if you Google it, you do get a definition. And it's a little bit more concrete than Jewish identity. I think we all have different senses of what the word identity is, and Jewish identity is never a bad thing. It's just in the terms of defining who you are as a person. Using the idea of identity can be very nebulous, and what we want to do is create something a little bit more substantive so we can all hold on to this. So I'm gonna see if my PowerPoint actually worked. It like reloaded and I can share my screen. Okay, woohoo. And here we go. Okay, so we'll start with at the very beginning, which is the definition of what Jewish peoplehood is, and I'm happy for people to open up their microphones or put in the chat what they think the definition is to start us off with the conversation. If people are not into that, you know, I can also just go onto my slides. It's harder to read the audience when everybody is thousands of miles apart from each other in their own rooms. But anybody want to take a crack at it? My current students know I'm very big in conversation, and since the other people here who are not your current students know me pretty well, they also know I'm big on conversation. Okay, so I hear somebody typing, but I'm going to move on to the next slide. What is Jewish peoplehood? I bolded a sense of belonging to the Jewish collective. That collective consciousness is composed of, oh boy, I have to move the thing, a shared path, a covenant of fate, and a shared future, a covenant of destiny. It also entails responsibility of the Jewish people and Jewish civilization. And if this is the definition of peoplehood, I can think of no holiday that defines Jewish peoplehood better than Pesach, because everything, so I just got a text in. I think peoplehood is a basic idea as to what binds us together. How did this group come to be? And that's absolutely true. And also, I think another important point is the last bullet point on the slide, which is that it's a responsibility for the future of the Jewish people and Jewish civilization, which I feel is fairly poignant right now, as we're all kind of holding us to see how our future is going to look different. I feel like we all understand we're on the precipice of a different reality. Those of us who are older than most of the people in this room remember this from 9/11, where you knew that things were about to change. You're just not quite sure how. So, this is something for us to contemplate. And of course, me being a Tanakh teacher, I always go back to Tanakh to see how it happened then as inspiration and food for thought for where we are now. So that is what we're going to be doing tonight. And we're going to start at the very beginning with the halacha that we get from the Mishnah, which encapsulates this idea of Jewish peoplehood. B'chol dor v'dor chayav adam lerot et atzmo ki'ilu hu yatsa miMitzrayim, right? That's the statement that we have on top of in our Haggadot, that in every generation we have to see ourselves as if we left Mitzrayim. The Rambam, however, modifies that lahalacha, and ubechol dor v'dor chayav adam leharariot et atzmo ki'ilu hu yatsa miMitzrayim. Sorry, guys. Shelo et avotinu b'vad ga'al el af otanu ga'al shene'amar ve'otanu hotzi misham laman hivi otanu latet lanu et haaretz asher nishba lavotenu. Right? It's not that we should just consider ourselves as if we've left Mitzrayim, but we should imagine ourselves, that we put ourselves into the frame of mind that we've left. And, in recent years, a lot of that has come into different initiatives to make the Haggadah experience and telling over the story, not just reading the text of the Haggadah, but making it a more interactive and lively discussion. Even with all of those tools that we use, which I think makes a much richer Pesach experience than everybody just reading a line from the Haggadah around, it's still this idea of imagining yourself as if you've left Mitzrayim. I think it's pretty hard for those of us living in, first world countries in the 21st century, where very little of what we experience. I think this year we might have a little bit of a different perspective on what it means to be in bondage, or at least not free the way that we're used to being free. But some of this idea of the Rambam was actually taken, the halacha, in customs is particularly the Sephardic community. And I have a few of them here. We're in a Persian Seder. People will chant Dayenu while holding bunches of celery, chives, or leeks or scallions, something leafy and green, and hit each other in the back to mimic bondage. Moroccan Jews will hold up a Seder plate and pass it over their heads while announcing to each participant that they have left Egypt and are now free. Tunisian Jews touch the heads of each person with a tray, which serves as a reminder to each person that they once carried the burdens upon their heads as slaves in Egypt. If any of you are from Sephardic communities where you do any of these minhagim or want to share, Leah, what do you do in your house?
My family is Moroccan and Persian, so we do both of the ones listed. They're
Okay.
great. They're definitely add entertainment.
And do they make you feel like, help you imagine that you are part of it more?
I don't know. It's definitely as a kid like a reason to be more involved, which I also know is a goal. So
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as I said, these traditions are born from the interpreting the Rambam Lahalakha, but I think it absolutely engages the kids in another way and something that you look forward to. And yeah, I think in the recent years, Ashkenazim have jumped on the bandwagon to try to make things a little bit more interactive. In any case, that said, all of these things in terms of what we do on Seder night always ultimately go back to the beginning, which is where we get the halachot of Pesach. I actually don't have in this quote the Haggadah Talavincha quote, because I'm more interested in this idea of defining ourselves as a nation, and that comes from the halachot that we have in the middle of Pesach Mitzrayim, where we get the unique halachot of the day to paint our doorposts and bring the Korban Pesach and all of those things that only happen once. At the end of the parak, we actually have the halachot of Chukata Pesach L'Dorot, what's going to happen in every generation. And a few things come up in these psukim that seem a little bit odd, and I think help shape our real understanding of what is going on with Pesach, what we're supposed to experience, and what the holiday is really about. And that comes in the first few psukim. Vayomer Hashem el Moshe ve'Aaron, Zot chukah haPesach, kol ben nechar lo yochal bo, v'kol eved ish mikneh kesef u'malta oto az ya'achal bo. Right? No non-Jew can be a part of the experience, and anybody who is an Eved has to be circumcised. Toshav v'sachir lo yuchal bo, strangers and renters, all the people who hang on to our community but not actually part of our community are not allowed to be part of the Korban Pesach, and they're not allowed to be part of the Pesach celebrations. As many of us are sitting home with a much more insular family dynamic in their seders this year. We're actually reading the psukim, like every house should eat by itself and not even break a bone. And actually from that pasuk, if you consider it, Bayit Echad there probably didn't mean just the insular family. It probably meant the extended family, because if you think about a Paschal lamb, they have quite a bit of meat, and if you couldn't break the bones, you had to have enough meat to feed everybody sitting in front of you. Like you have this entire. I once attended a share a long time ago where he said it those images of what are they called in Hawaii? The barbecues, the pow pow. I don't. You can turn on your microphone, Tammy. What is it called?
Luau's.
The luau's, right. The luau's, where they have the entire pig on a spit, right? We did that with a lamb on Pesach, and the point was not really to be so graphic, but because normally people didn't eat food that way, and it's one of the many ways that we include a big group and also get the kids to ask, because it's weird to eat any barbecue that way. Like you normally would butcher an animal. I'm sorry for the vegetarians who are out there. I don't mean to make you queasy, but that's what's going on. We can't have strangers come with us, but our family groups can be quite large enough to eat an entire animal. And it's kind of curious why we'd start off with all this emphasis about who can't join us, unless we think about that the people who join are part of what defines us as who we are. Now, I feel like that's kind of cyclical. So I'm gonna make that point in a second, what I mean by that. But we go ki yagor itcha ger v'asa pesach l'Hashem himo lo kol zachar ve'az yikrev la'asot v'haya ke'ezrach Yisrael. Right? If you have a stranger living amongst you and he wants to do Pesach, you have to circumcise every male, and then he can become part of a citizen of the land. V'chol hara lo yuchal bo. Right? The connection between Brit Milah and Pesach is this intrinsic connection that on the surface seems kind of odd, and at the core is actually really where this all begins, which is what does the Brit Milah do, and what does the Korban Pesach do? Okay, so from the Sefer Chinuch, the definition of why we do Brit Milah is to show that we're becoming parts of individuals as part of the community, and specifically that it is Brit Milah and it is done on the organ that it is done on is because it's about family continuity. It's a little graphic, the Sefer Chinuch, but the last line of the Sefer Chinuch is Ein b'chol Torah mitzvah shechayavim al bitula karet, right? There's no other mitzvah except for ki im zo v'shchitat haPesach. There are only two halachot in the entire Torah where you have an Isser karet and an aseh. And what I find particularly moving and it's thoughtful about this is not that we're trying to invoke the fear of heaven by saying if you don't do these things you're chayav karet, because the idea of invoking karet for something that you failed to do is such a weird concept to begin with, right? You failed to do something, so you missed the opportunity, right? You sleep through Shabbos, so you missed all the ideas of the assays of Shabbos, but you haven't violated Shabbos, right? So you've done nothing wrong. You just haven't done anything exceptionally good, right? And in this case, there are two mitzvot aseh where if you don't fulfill them, you're chayav karet, that it's something that comes from the heavens in terms of invoking some sort of punishment. And again, I don't want to focus this on the punishment, but in terms of what the definition is that you've missed some opportunity with God, basically. These two mitzvot are the mitzvot that these two mitzvot are the mitzvot that define who we are as an individual with Brit Milah and as a nation with the Korban Pesach. And actually, if this were a slightly different shir, I would take you to, and I'm sure somebody has done this with you over the past week, take you to both Brit Milah and Brit Tarim with Avraham Avinu and show you how each one of those britot set us up as both individuals in terms of our relationship with God and as a nation in terms of relationship with God. And that that in order to fulfill the mitzvah of Yetziat Mitzrayim or Pesach, you must have a Brit Milah, because you first have to pledge your personal allegiance to God before you could join the covenant of the community in order for us to be a community towards God. In order for us to have peoplehood, you have to have identity. So here I am coming back to those terms, but I think they're actually, very, very apt in terms of setting things up, right? And the Sefer Chinuch under Korban Pesach, and if you go through all the Sefer Chinuch in in Shemot, where he talks about the Pesach, he'll often say, and I explained this under Yetziat Mitzrayim, right? Mishorshei mitzvah zo, ma shekatavnu b'acherot lezecher Yetziat Mitzrayim. What I've written in other places about Yetziat Mitzrayim, b'avor shakarban zo lezecher cherotenu u'ba'enu b'brit ne'amana im Hashem yibarach, right? The whole point of this korban is to remember our freedom, to commemorate our freedom. I translated it that way, and are coming into the covenant with God, right? The whole reason why we do Korban Pesach and we remember it year after year is because while we are as individuals in our community still pledging our allegiance to God, once a year we come together and we pledge our communal allegiance to God, and it sets us up as a community going forward. It's again, the irony of this year and the lots of points of contemplation are not lost of any of us on this year. But what I want to do now is go through Tanakh, because interestingly, Pesach is the only holiday that is celebrated repeatedly in Tanakh. We've got Sukkot a couple of times, but repeatedly we have public festivals of Passover celebrations that go on, which begs the question: why do they keep doing it? Why do we need to keep telling them? And sometimes it's pretty with Harif language. They hadn't done it in a really long time, and what does that mean? And what is Pesach being used as? And why is Tanakh recording this for us to think about all these years later? So we're going to start with the first Pesach that was celebrated after Egypt, which actually wasn't obvious. We have this in Bamidbar, and it's called Pesach Midbar, and we're told, Pesach b'moado. Did you lose me again in terms of volume, or you have me? You're good. Okay, thank you. And what's interesting here is actually it wasn't so obvious that we were going to celebrate a Pesach in the desert, because if you go back to Shemot, we were told that the next time we would celebrate Pesach was when we got to Israel. Now, had things go on according to plan, right? They celebrated Pesach, and then they had gone straight to Israel. They would have been in Israel, after it, in another couple of weeks, right? They were in the desert. They celebrated their Pesach. They had already gotten the Sefer Torah. Wait, no, the Sefer Torah was about to be given to them. It's Ein Mukdam U'Meuchar B'Torah, and I apologize. I got to the Rashi and I didn't go through it in detail today, which always is. This is the one time though where actually Ramban has to say Ein Mukdam U'Meuchar B'Torah. In general, he hates to say it, but the dates are given here, and he can't avoid saying, "But wait a second, it opens up in Iyar, and now we are back in Nisan." So that's just a nice little trivia fact. In any case, right, so they are bringing Korban Pesach. We're told about it here really because of Pesach Sheni, right? The Tzmeim who were carrying Yosef's bones, who were cranky that they didn't get to do Pesach along with everybody else, and they got a special dispensation, which could then get written into halacha. But at this point, if things had gone according to plan, what Pesach would have been is kind of a transition, a ma'avar, from being the people who were slaves who celebrated it last year to people who were free the first year, right? The first year you celebrate a holiday, or an anniversary. We could set an anniversary because not many of us have gone to celebrating a holiday in the first time in that way. But if you go back to Hakamat Hamedina, actually the first year of Hey Iyar, it became a very big controversy in Israel about celebrating Yom Ha'atzmaut, because all the people and most of the people from Gush Etzion were celebrating the first Yartzeit, because Daled Iyar is when Gush Etzion fell, and they didn't feel it was appropriate to be setting up a holiday when they're all in mourning, which is actually how we got the compromise for Yom HaZikaron and Yom Ha'atzmaut. But the poignancy of celebrating that first year of, like, it's been a year that we've been a state, right? That's exactly what's going on in Pesach Midbar, is we have been out of Egypt for a year. We are celebrating it. It is we are no longer slaves. We've been free for a year, and we're ready to go into the land. And next year we're going to celebrate it in Eretz Yisrael. Now, things didn't go according to plan, and maybe the transition from being slaves to free people wasn't quite as smooth as it should have been, and I think that's an implicit message of what's going on in Sefer Bamidbar in general, right? We've got things we don't hear from the Jews for 38 years, and Pesach and Bamidbar is that Sefer that goes through those 38 years, and we really should be seeing people who are ready to embrace being free and independent, and we don't see that, right? And it's something for us to think about in terms of where they are as a community and where they still need to go in the community. And as I said, 38 quiet years passed, and the next time we see Pesach being celebrated is actually in Yehoshua. And that is where they actually make this transition, right? And Yehoshua is setting it up. This is what Pesach Midbar should have been, ultimately. And if you see here, Yehoshua is actually doing the group Brit Milah, right? Be'etehiyam, and if you see where my pointer is, I'm at the end of the second line. Be'etehi amar Hashem el Yoshua, say lecha charvot tzuruvim v'shuv mul et b'nei Yisrael shenit. Do it a second time. The Mefarshim will ask, what do you mean a second time? And it comes to light, and through Rashi, who's quoting the Gemara, that, during the time in the Midbar that they didn't circumcise their sons. Why that didn't happen in the Midbar is also Machloket Rishonim, whether it was dangerous because of life in the desert or it was dangerous because they were going to get up and travel any moment. It was clearly something that they weren't doing, and it was something that they knew that they had to start doing again. And before anybody, right, they're in the desert for 40 years in a holding pattern, waiting to become this nation that they're supposed to become. And the first thing that they all do is they individually, as families, as part of people who want to join the covenant, circumcise themselves, and and then they're ready to go to celebrate the Pesach Gilgal. And in this place, this is what they're getting ready to do. Now, it's interesting, actually. There's an article I read by a professor from Bar Ilan who went through all the different, I'll remember his name, hopefully. He went through all the different scenes in the Tanakh of different places where there was a celebration of Pesach by the Jews. And he actually identified a key point of what was going on in the transition here. So one thing that he identified in Sefer Yehoshua is a transition out of Gilui Arayot. Specifically, if you go to the end of Sefer Bamidbar and you look at the event with Baal Peor and going out of Egypt and into Canaan, the purging themselves of negative forces having to do with Gilui Arayot, is one of the goals of Yehoshua celebrating a public Pesach. I mean, I think it really, ultimately, it's also to set them up in the frame of mind. We are here, we are ready, we are free people, and we are about to take the land, and I want to empower you to feel the sense of community and the sense of purpose, right? We have a common past, and we have a common future, and the connection to the Arelim and the Brit Milah, I think, is a nice little literary touch in terms of a nod towards Gilui Arayot, which goes back to what the Sefer Chinuch was saying in terms of the reasons for why we specifically have Brit Milah where we have Brit Milah. But I think also what's an interesting fact is if you pay attention in your Haggadah in a few nights, you'll notice that the review of history that we're given after Halach is a quote from Yehoshua. Yehoshua in Perek Chavdalad actually reviews history with Bnei Israel before he dies, similar to what Moshe Rabbeinu does. But Yehoshua is now reviewing history to the first generation who didn't live through it. And what he wants to give over is this message of a sense of purpose and a sense of mission. And as the leader who is leaving them, he did the transition. He took them out of being the slave people who were in the desert, who were nomads, and he gave them a permanent place and a permanent land. And the celebration of Pesach at the beginning of Sefer Yehoshua, bookended by his historical review, which we actually have as part of our Haggadah, I think is a beautiful symmetry that we can take with us when we read through his history, his version of history, or his record of history during the Haggadah later on this week. And then a lot of time passes, and we know that the next several hundred years are pretty chaotic for the Jewish people. And the next time we actually have Pesach celebrated is under Chizkiyahu. And interestingly enough, if you look at the source at the top of the page, the record of Chizkiyahu is not found in Malachim. It is not recorded in Malachim at all. And that is because Chizkiyahu wasn't so kosher. So I'm going to go back to what he does, and I'm going to read to you the record of it in the Mishnah Pesachim, which teaches us about Chizkiyahu as a character. Shisha dvarim asa Chizkiyahu melech Yehuda, al shosha hodulo, ve'al shosha lo hodulo. So Chizkiyahu did 6 things, 3 of which he was praised for, and 3 that he was not praised for. Al shosha hodulo, girar atzmot aviv al mitah shel chaver. The 3 things that he was praised for: that he dragged his father's bones through to the street on a bed of ropes. Chizkiyahu's father was Achaz, who's on the list of notably bad kings. Chizkiyahu, however, is a good king, and I'm going to get to his transition in history in a second. The Hodulo. Kitat Nachasha Nechoshet Hodulo. He got rid of the copper snake, and they praised him. The Nachasha Nechoshet is actually what's created at the end of Sefer Bamidbar to stop the Magefa with Baal Peor, and he was praised for doing this because apparently people were starting to use it as avodah zarah, and he got rid of it because it had any tones, anything had any tones of idolatry, needed to get rid of. Ganaz Sefer Refuot v'hodulo, he hid the book of medicine, and they also praised him. The Ramban actually has a really interesting article talking about the connections between refuah and avodah zarah and believing in magic based on this Mishnah. It's not that I don't think we should take it as anything on modern medicine, but certainly medicine in the ancient times was a lot more based on signs and spells than it was on science, and that's basically the Ramban's conclusion there. And those are the three things that they praised him for, and all three of those things are getting rid of the shading or the aura of avodah zarah that Yechezkiyahu inherited from his father. And there are three things that he did not get praised for. So he took off the doors of the Beit HaMikdash and he sent them to the king of Ashur. This was as a tribute to pay off taxes, so the king of Ashur wouldn't attack him. The king of Ashur was otherwise known as Sancheriv, and he did attack him. He just didn't win. We have both Sancheriv's account of this and our account of it in Malachim. Chizkiyahu got pretty lucky. I mean, Chizkiyahu, we attribute it to God saving him. Sancheriv attributes it to Chizkiyahu not being worth his time. But in any case, we wind up paying taxes to Ashur to get him to be a little bit nicer to us. And clearly that was not looked upon fondly by Chazal. Stam et made Gichon ha'elyon v'lo hudulo. He plugged up the waters of the Gichon. Anybody who's done the water tunnels, the Chizkiyahu water tunnels, have walked through this part of the Mishnah. Why is Chazal not praising him? Because the water system to Jerusalem seems like a good thing. Of all the things on the list, this is actually the most confusing. And the general consensus is that they didn't praise him for this because he didn't have enough bitachon in God that God would save him. And it goes within the theme of avodah zarah versus believing in God, because the last one, Iber Nisan ben Nisan v'lo hodulo, he created a leap year in Nisan, and he was not praised for this. So I don't know if anybody was paying attention recently, but a few weeks ago there was a rumor going around that it wasn't a rumor, it was actually a legal document that was submitted to the Supreme Court here in Israel to ask the court to consider making Adar Chodesh Me'uberet so that we could push off Pesach this year because of Corona. Now, it was a very creative thing to send out, but I immediately thought of this Mishnah because, of course, that's what Chizkiyahu did. It was not taken seriously, but it was passed around in groups of lawyers to talk about creative solutions to Pesach coming when we don't feel like we're quite ready for it. But it is what it is, and we'll make do. And unfortunately, Chizkiyahu didn't have that thought. Chizkiyahu was so excited about his Baal Tshuva movement. So this goes back to his whole relationship with Sancheriv. Chizkiyahu gets saved from Sancheriv, and as a result, he starts, becoming more observant and religious, and dedicating the Beit HaMikdash. The Navi during his time was Yeshayahu, and they had a pretty close relationship, and he held Chizkiyahu's hand through a lot of it, and he did a lot of great things. But part of the reason why Pesach Chizkiyahu is not included in Malachim is because he didn't do it in the right way. And in fact, if we see it here in the Psukim, not everybody. So I'm in the second paragraph. So the people in the north, right? The people in the north who are no longer part of the kingdom of Judah, and by the way, about to get expelled under Sancheriv, but that's like another story. They started making fun of them because, even Akidei Kach, that they were not part of the same kingdom, and they actually had their own Bamot in Beit El and Dan, they still didn't think you should just make Pesach whenever you wanted to make Pesach, right? What was Chizkiyahu trying to do? Well, he was trying to harness the energy that he knew the Pesach would have. He wanted to bring people back to Torah and to tell them that they won the war and that we're all enabled and empowered by our relationship with God, and that he saved us, and this is awesome. And therefore he was so into that he wanted to push off Nisan for a month so they could celebrate Pesach as a nation in this way, drawing out what he knew were the echoes of what Yoshua had done and what Moshe had done in the Midbar, but he didn't succeed, and because of that, right? It is not recorded in Sefer Melachim. It is in Divrei Yamim, and that's a little bit about the difference between Divrei Yamim and Melachim, which I'm not going to get into right now. But we have record of it both in Mishnah and in Tanakh itself, and it isn't a high point in terms of Chizkiyahu's Melucha. What's interesting is that the next time we have a Pesach that is recorded in Melachim, and again, Melachim is a Sefer of Nevuah versus a Sefer of Ketuvim, and is being recorded down with a different sense of weight and posterity, is with Yoshiyahu. So Yoshiyahu is the last good king of Yehuda. He's 2 generations after Chizkiyahu. He almost gets it. He also has his own Baal Tshuva movement when he finds a Sefer Torah in the Beit HaMikdash, and he decides that after the end of his entire refurbishing of the Beit HaMikdash and bringing everybody back and destroying all the Avodah Zarah, right? Similar to what Chizkiyahu did, is a celebration of wiping out all of the Avodah Zarah, but not quite getting that commitment to God and belief in God also has to be there. Yoshiyahu, on the other hand, gets it right? And he declares a public Pesach holiday. Vayitzav HaMelech al kol ha'am le'mor asu Pesach le'Hashem Elokechem k'katuv al Sefer Brit Hazeh ki lo na'aseh k'Pesach hazeh mimei hashoftim asher shaptu at Yisrael, because they had not done a Pesach like this from the days of the Shoftim, when the Shoftim judged Israel. Now this pasuk is, a red flag for any of us who've read Tanakh, because first of all, is it saying that they hadn't celebrated Pesach? I mean, they just said that they just found a Sefer Torah. Like there are all these questions in terms of what they mean by not celebrating it. Is it that it just hasn't been a public event like this, or had they really not done it? I mean, even though the shot really does seem to indicate that they hadn't done it, nobody really interprets it that way. They leave it as a public Pesach that had not been done since the times of the Shoftim. We only have record of it from the time of Yehoshua, but certainly most of the Rishonim say that during the times of Shmuel Navi, they still had public celebrations of Pesach that were of note. But Yoshiyahu was drawing on the past to celebrate this time the destruction of all of the Avodah Zarah around, and reaffirming us as a nation, and both looking backwards and forwards, right? This idea of peoplehood is our shared narrative, but also our shared history. And the Pesach as a public entity is going to usher in an entirely new era. Now, Yoshiyahu was pretty hopeful and optimistic that if he did things right, he would stave off all of those horrible things that Yirmiyahu was saying were going to happen. He only really succeeded in staving it off during his lifetime, but he got as close as anybody got. And this Pesach is definitely a feather in his cap in terms of leaving us with a taste of what a true public celebration of Pesach should be. And he clearly is inspired by his predecessors. Chizkiyahu notwithstanding, if we're going to go through 5 instances of Pesach being celebrated by the people, 4 out of 5 of them do exactly what they're supposed to do. Chizkiyahu doesn't quite fit the mark. In any case, so we end the story of Yeshayahu. V'kamo lo haya lefanav melech asher shavet Hashem b'chol levav b'chol nafsho b'chol mo'odo k'chol Torat Moshe v'charav lo kam kamohu. Right? Yeshayahu was unparalleled in terms of bringing people back to God, and there was no other like him. Right? He left on a high, and he did his best for creating a community feeling within the people, and probably bolstered them to get through the hard times ahead. Like this is pretty much towards the end of Sefer Melachim. The next two prakim are all about the Chorban. This is the last positive thing that happens, and clearly, that's not coincidental on so many levels, but I think the message within that is pretty strong too, is that Pesach has this power to unite and inspire in a way that no other tradition we have does. I mean, we have many traditions daily, weekly, monthly, yearly towards Zecher L'Yetzias Mitzrayim, but nothing is like Pesach in terms of this experiential discussion of putting ourselves in the shoes of our forefathers as a way of us creating our own self-identity and narrative, I guess, for lack of a better word. There's one other occasion, and that happens, one second, that happens during Bayit Sheni. And again, it's the same type of objective. And this time, though, Ezra's doing something interesting that I think we still feel today, which is that Ezra, at the beginning, he's the beginning of the second wave of Shavei Tzion, right? There was a generation before him that started building the temple. They got stopped by the indigenous, or the people who remained in the land of Israel who were not Jewish, and Ezra was part of that second wave that brought people back and restarted building the Beit HaMikdash. And now his challenge during his time was very much that not everybody came with him, and not everybody was interested, and not everybody was doing what they needed to be doing. And the second half of Sefer Ezra is all about trying to create a different reality. But Ezra's also trying to draw off of the shared past, and his transition in terms of all of the takanot that he did, and the way that he envisioned the celebration of the holiday is something that I think is part of our Seder today, which is that it was clear that not everybody was going to go back. There were going to be some people in the Beit HaMikdash, and actually, incidentally, it is clear from historic sources that people were still bringing the Korban Pesach well after the second Beit HaMikdash was destroyed. Let's say for a couple hundred years, it's referred to in the Gemara, right? So the practice of not sacrificing a lamb stayed on after the temple, but Ezra was envisioning a reality where things weren't only going to be centered around the temple, but he wanted to start with a big bang. So he does a couple of things, and one of which is at the beginning of when he gets there, he arrives in Israel, and he says, right? He arrives in Israel for the Pesach holiday, and he cleans everything up, and he brings the people who came in from exile, and they ve'asu chag matzot shivat yamim b'simcha ki samcham Hashem l'seiv leiv melech Ashur alehem l'chazek yadeim melech beit Elohim Elohei Yisrael. Right? They made a Pesach celebration, Chag HaMatzot celebration, in a way that with joy that they hadn't really been able to experience until that point. And what's being emphasized in Ezra is the relationship with Hashem. So again, if we go back to Chizkiyahu and we look at him not quite getting, that getting rid of Avodah Zarah, but not necessarily doing everything according to the way God wants it is the way to do it. Ezra is totally understanding that this idea of building the relationship with God is primary to the public celebration of Pesach and Chag HaMatzot, and it's also going to be the foundation and the strengthening force that's going to take the people forward in that generation. In fact, actually, what Ezra does then is 6 months later, he does a public hakel. He brings everybody together and he reads the Sefer Torah out loud to them. And again, if we take vestiges that when we get to the end of the Shemitah here in Israel, the prime minister reads from the Sefer Torah at the Kotel as a way of mimicking Hakel. And, you know, there are lots of things that are not quite right about that. But what is interesting is that this idea that we've got these traditions that are built into our system in terms of bringing us together as a nation. And Ezra understood, in a way Chizkiyahu didn't, is that like not everything had to be a big bang and you didn't need to force things into place. He came in, he saw not everybody was doing it, he did what he could do, he created the holiday to the best of his ability, and it was a joyous holiday. And then 6 months later, he did a much bigger shebang in Sukkot, and there's lots of parallels between the Pesach holiday and Sukkot holiday. Again, that's a different share for a different time. But Ezra takes us to the end of our survey of all the different times that we celebrate Pesach in Tanakh, with leaving us with a taste in our mouth that he gets it, and his getting it is actually a lot of what happens in terms of what Ezra does for Judaism as a whole, which is why the Gemara credits him with being like Moshe Rabbeinu, and they use the phrase Chazar Atara Liyoshna, that he returned the crown to its former glory, which is that he was able to bring the people back to a place where they understood how to keep God centered in their lives and celebrating the holidays in the way that they could best celebrate them with a different reality. And, you know, over the years that morphed into us saying the Haggadah, not the Haggadah Levincha, because that was clearly always there, but the text of our Haggadah, which, you know, is clearly beginning to take shape by the time we get to the Gemara, with different statements of the Mishnayot that we quote in the name of Rabbi Akiva, and then also, you know, how we end our Seder with Rabban Gamliel talking about our chiyuv for the minimum of 3 things that we have to say in our Seder, and that and all of that, this talking about our shared past and envisioning ourselves as part of it will help us create our shared future. I have a quote from Rav Soloveitchik which touches on this. The Korban Pesach serves as the identical function of Brit Milah throughout our history. It is more than a single positive commandment. It is the mark of our collective identity. Like the Korban Pesach, the journey required a leap of faith. Those who refused to offer the Korban Pesach showed a disbelief in God. These severe transgressions required a severe punishment, karet. The Korban Pesach that most openly captures the broader values of Judaism of Mesirat Nefesh, self-sacrifice, and Arevut, interdependency. Right? So we have the self-sacrifice in our Brit Milah, and we have our Arevut in terms of us coming together as a community. And I just thought I'd end with one more quote from Natan Sharansky, who's become my hero with that YouTube video that he's put out recently in terms of dealing with this idea of not being free. All the resources of a superpower cannot isolate the man who hears the voice of freedom, a voice I heard from the very chamber of my soul. And that, I feel like, is a great quote for us to think about as we tell the Haggadah this year, to think about what freedom means as a nation and as an individual in terms of where we want to be, where we'd rather be, how we're coping with our reality, where we are, and how the different experiences within Tanakh dealt with their reality on different levels, and how they all took from where their situation were their own situations and used it to both reflect on their past and set up a pathway for the future. So thank you for learning with me tonight. I did a lot of talking right now. Are there any questions from anybody? Comments? Thoughts?
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
And
Thank
Thank you. Nice to see everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a Chag Kasher v'Sameach.
Have a Chag Kasher v'Sameach.
Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Chag Sameach.
Bye.
Thank you.